Hello everyone, so this is explanations for the puzzles for this week. Um, okay, this is our first position. It's black to move. How do we go about solving this position? Well, I think because white starting mate in one, it makes our options limited. So I mean, it makes our choice easier because we have less options. So most of our options don't make sense. Like for example, the captures don't make sense because mate in one's threatened. So how do we stop mate in one? Considering this is a puzzle, so we have like basically only a few ways: G6, F5, Knight F6. But Knight F6 is not great because of course it just takes knight. Yeah, and then he's still throwing mate in one, so we lost the knight. And we can try G6, but since it's a puzzle, let's start with the most forcing moves. Of course, I think by this logical thinking, we should come to the move F5. And if we look closer, it's actually a very interesting move because let's say white moves the queen away. Let's say queen H4. But in this case, then black plays E4, and we're forking two pieces, and black wins a piece and wins. So what about taking the pawn? Well, this looks like F5 just gives away pawn because bishop protects the queen. It's only once again H7 is threatened, but looking closer, I think we can find that black has this nice move knight F6. He's guarding H7. Now you might ask what's the difference white takes again, but the queen is hanging. It's take or upper queen, and it's nice that after knight F6 the queen is actually trapped. Like the queen has no squares. So black wins. And yeah, so after F5, white cannot take, white cannot play queen H4, E4. Objectively, the best move for white is maybe queen E2. The idea is after you fork white's rook E1, trying to counterpin the pawn to the E8 rook. But of course, it's not necessary to see this because in this position, if we compare the positions, here we got F5 and E4, very strong pawns, and also we stop mate on H7. So here it's already by comparisons are much better. So we don't even need to think about that. And in addition, black can play knight B6. He's completely winning here. Rook E6 is even stronger, and rook G6. Removing the pin on the E file, and then this bishop and both these pieces will be hanging, and the knight cannot move because the G5 will be hanging. So black's basically winning. So I think again, logical thinking, we start from most forcing moves. F5 comes to mind, and then once we see it, we trap the queen. Then the solution comes very easily. So on to the next position. I believe this one white to play. Okay, it looks messy, but just figure out what to do here. We're down a piece, and our knight and rook are hanging. Okay, how do we go about this? I guess. Well, obviously we should start with the most forcing move. And what's the most forcing move in chess? It's a check. So, fortunately here we don't have one check to consider. So let's check. Rook takes e6. Does it work? Well, we took the knight with check, so black has to take. And okay, it can continue the forcing move. Of course, we can take the bishop with the knight, but it's much more forcing to take the bishop with the queen, and now it's a check, so it's a very forcing move. King takes g5. This is the key point. Well, he takes knight. He can play king h5, but you see, king is on h5. We have two pawns that can help in the attack. We have a queen and we have two knights. It's obviously enough to mate. The easiest is knight gf3, simply moving knight back, and we'll have the threat of queen f5, queen g5 mate, and on numerous other mate threats, it's obviously black cannot survive with the king on h5 with no help. So the only point is what happens after he takes a knight. Because the point is, if knight f3 check, this doesn't work because king f4, and we're not mating him. But we have two pawns, like we said, a knight and a queen, so it should be enough. Since this knight check on f3 doesn't work, next logical check, well, I think it's logical to use the pawn, and h4 comes to mind, and then when we look closer, this actually works, because at h4, he has to play king f4. Let's say if he takes the pawn, then we bring the knight into the attack, knight f3, and we have a familiar main pattern, queen f5, queen g5 move. Okay, and if king h5, we can play queen f5 at least, queen f5. If you take, then knight f3 is made, king h6, queen g5 is made. So after h4, it's forced to come to f4. It looks like there's still no mate. But once again, we understand that the king is on f4. We have, even the king participates in attacks. We have like 5 attacking units here. So obviously, he cannot survive, and black in this position has no checks because the knight guards f1. Black has no threats, even though he's upper rook. We can simply continue the attack. There's no need to have a forced win here. And if you check the checks, they don't actually work. But using this principle that like white's attack continues even though he's down a rook because black has absolutely nothing to do. We can find, because captures are also forcing moves, and then by process of elimination, we found that queen takes d5, and as we mentioned, knight guards f1, there's no checks, and black has to resign here because it may fall shortly. Threat of queen g5 mate, threat of queen e4 mate, not to mention like mate in 2s, mate in 3s. Yeah, so black simply has no defense because, I mean, just look at these 3 pieces on the queen side. They're not helping this king on f4. So how will we solve this? Again, complicated position, but start with forcing moves. So most forcing moves. Okay, there's a trap not to fall for knight f3, king f4. But once we find h4, and then here basically, of course we can check forcing moves with checks, but I mean, I guess you could find it by forcing moves too, because after checks, next on the list is capturing. You'll find queen takes d5. It also comes from understanding that the king is on f4. We have so many attacking pieces. He obviously can't survive with his queen, rook, and knight on the queen side. So our next position is this. If you notice, this is a similar position from the last one. Okay. Like to move again with down material, but as I said, the knight controls f1, so still no threats. And okay, this king is open on g8, so we should take advantage of that. Well, what would come to mind at first? Well, king rook e8 comes to mind. Then black plays king f7. When we see if we have no checks because the bishop guards c6, knight guards c7, pawn gets f5 and g5, and we simply have no checks. So what else? Let's come back to this position. Obviously taking g7 also doesn't work. I'm just giving the rook. So this situation, none of the forcing moves work, but okay, so forcing moves means checks first, that's number 1. Captures is number 2. And then after that, if you don't have any checks captures, the third on the list is threatening moves. Let's say you make a move that threatens mate in 1, or you make a move that threatens to take his piece, like his queen, his rook, his knight, something. That's also very forceful because you make a threat. So in this position, or you can know by this possible elimination, we can find that move rook b7 works, and we hit the queen, and if he takes, then queen e8 is made. Another way to solve this is, if you notice, the king is almost back rank, but it's not back rank because of f7 square. I mean, I think typical pattern is with the queen on e8, it's a mate. It's like a typical mate, and okay, and then if you see that, now rook is in the way. So a rook in the way, just simply remove it. Where can we remove it? Okay, to b7 because we're threatening the queen. So that's another way to solve it. Or you can, yeah, check forcing moves, threatening moves, and you can find rook b7. And okay, black has to resign after rook b7. There's simply no defense. He has to take, otherwise he loses queen, and then we have the checkmate. So once you see it, it's very simple. And our next position. This position, it's white to play. We're down a piece, but we have 3 pawns for the piece, and we have a pawn f7. A few things here. Okay, obviously this bishop's hanging, and we have our own bishop and rook that hang. So we're down a piece, but what's our main asset in this position? It's obviously the pawn f7 because it's 1 move away from queening. The problem is if we play something like rook e8, threatening the queen, then he takes. And obviously we don't want this. But our rook is also threatened, so what can we do? If you look at the forcing moves like checks, they really don't work. Black just takes the free material and... Okay, what about another idea? Maybe we can somehow support the f7 pawn. Because if you imagine, if this pawn is protected and we played rook e8, then black cannot take on f7 and we'll queen next move. So how can we do this? Maybe start from move rook f1. Rook f1, we protect the pawn, and we're starting rook g8 check, and then promote. Unfortunately, our rook is hanging, so he just takes, and that's not good either. Let's check another move. How about e6? This looks like a nice, good move also. e6, we protect the pawn, and we're throwing rook g8 check and promoting as always. But we have the same problem. King takes f8, and we're not promoting. But are we? We should continue the line here. Because in this, compared to this line, we still have forcing moves. Like forcing moves as in checks or captures. We still can take this bishop. And if we continue this line, we can see that whites are simply winning because rook c8 is coming unstoppably, and we're queen. There's nothing black can do. We're down a rook, but we're going to play rook c8 check, f8 queen, and black loses. And yeah, here black can try something like rook d1 check, you might ask, to deflect the rook. After takes, the rook is deflected from c5. But it simply doesn't matter. We just play king f2 because we have this very strong third rook g8, so black has to react to this. It still has to take anyway, but then we take here as we said, and we have rook c8 coming, and white wins again. So I think in this, to solve this position, you have to basically understand that your main goal is to promote the f7 pawn, otherwise you're down a piece. So you have to try to promote it at all costs. And move e6, like if you go through move by move, you'll find move e6 actually works because we're promoting this pawn simply. And okay, one more thing. You might think maybe you can change the move order. If rook takes c2, and after you take the rook, then now e6, white does win. But unfortunately here, she takes the bishop on the rook, and at the same time he stops e6, so this doesn't work. Next position is this one. Okay, it looks like normal position of materials balanced, but yeah, this probably came from the Grunfeld. It looks quite normal, but there's actually something I can do here. It's not natural to at first instinct, but if you consider the forcing moves, you find it easily because there's only one capture in this position. It's taking knight, And if you check it, it actually simply wins. You take the knight, he takes an f4, because you remove the knight from protecting c4, and this knight is simply trapped in the middle of the board. And it's obviously not a natural move because you trade bishop for knight, and your bishop is very strong. And after this, you have weak dark squares. I mean, dark square bishop is very important, but tactically, you just win a piece. Obviously, it's a very easy solution by checking force moves, and you trap the knight in one move. Next position. Quite interesting one next one. This position, and I can tell you the last move, black played knight d4 to e2. I mean, this actually didn't happen in the game, but also nice variation analysis. And okay, first of all, we should understand what is the point of this, because it looks completely insane. We're hanging the queen's hanging, the rook on c8's hanging, the knight's hanging, but that has a devastating threat of rook c1 mate. Then if you take the queen, he has rook c1, he'll mate. If you take the rook, he'll take your rook on d1 with me. And also if you take the knight with the bishop, then he removes the defender, the rook on d1, and then simply makes your next move. This also doesn't work. But okay, we shouldn't panic. And first of all, once again, start with forcing moves, because okay, black's making a forcing combination, but maybe we can try to disrupt something. And maybe something he missed. Start with checks and captures. Well, let's say rook e8 check. But in this case, this really doesn't do much. Yes, if he would take with the rook, it distracts his rook, but he obviously takes with his queen. And his queen's out of danger, and you just lost the rook, so it's not good. What about queen f8 check? This also looks quite insane. If you take a close look, you find this is actually the brilliant winning move, queen f8. Black simply loses after this move. Once again, you can find this move simply by checking the forcing moves, and you can come to find that queen f8 works. I mean, the idea is either deflect the rook from the c file for mating on c1, or you attract the king to f8, where taking the queen will come with check. And of course, the difference between queen f8 and rook e8 is the queen cannot escape, because his queen doesn't move like a knight. He can't play queen d7 takes f8. So queen f8 check, and yeah, black simply has nothing. If king takes, for example, you take the queen check. Okay, we traded queens, but the important thing is the queen's no longer on d7, so there's no queen takes d1, for example. King trade. Obviously we can take the knight first. You can also take the bishop with check first, and then take the knight. It's also completely winning. White just basically wins a piece because the queen on d7 has been removed. And if rook takes f8, then the rook is deflected from c1, and we take the queen with our knight. This knight's attacked. This rook is attacked. We can potentially take the bishop as well, and black's again lost. For instance, if he goes here, we get the same position as in this position. As you see, can take on f6 first, or take on e2, as we said. Yeah, and white wins at least a piece. Not to mention that he was up upon in the starting position. So to find this, just check the forcing moves. Queen f8 looks insane, but if you check it, take a closer look. It's a brilliant move that works. So. Now, last position. with this position, yeah, it's black to move. Again, we notice we're down 2 pieces. White has an extra knight and a bishop, but well, this king is an f3, so obviously we should have some way to take advantage of this. Once again, forcing moves. I mean, the king's on f3, so it's very natural to give checks. Let's think. If check on h1, then he runs, and his king's running away. It's going to hide on the queen side. Doesn't help. Check on h5. Well, this doesn't help either. And he can even come here because there's no checks. Check on h4. Well, just takes it. Nothing happened. Rook takes f4. Well, he just takes the bishop. It was really no point to all these checks. Okay, I'm not going to mention moves like queen g2 and h3. Obviously, we don't have enough pieces to mate there. There's a clever check, knight e5 check. We're making use of a pin. F5, but the same story. After king e3, we really don't have any way to follow up. For example, we can play d4 check. D4 check, it's almost made, but the king just runs, keeps running and runs to c3, and like we're still down 2 pieces. And obviously, it's not what we were looking for. What about another check? Well, this actually looks attractive, bishop g4 check, because it's okay. It's a skewer on the queen on d1, so he cannot play king d3 because king e3, because then he at least loses his queen, so he has to take. But compared to other checks, this is obviously a big improvement because his king has been lured to g4. Obviously, we sacrifice another piece, but his king's on g4 now. It's not going in this direction. It's on g4, where we have knight rook. We have knight rook, 2 pawns, a queen. I mean, there should be somewhere to make. Okay, and we should continue our forcing moves, but also have some idea when we look at them. Well, the white king just went for f3 g4. It's obviously very weak on g4. Obviously, he wants to go back to f3 to have a safe haven here. So, for example, that's why a move like h5 check is illogical because after king f3, and we just lost a piece for nothing. And okay, rook takes f4. Yeah, just takes it. It doesn't matter. But now, what about knight e5 check? This is once we see this move, we understand that this simply wins the game because check. We take away the f3 square, so he's forced to take. But what did this do for us? We gave a check, but we opened the f file. Obviously, this is good for our rook, and we not only open the f file, but we cut off the f3 square. His king on h4 has no squares, and finally we see their final move, h5. Just a little pawn check, but the king has nowhere to go, and he simply leaves. Once again, you can solve this by checking force move, h4, knight e5, h5. After you get used to such things, it becomes quite natural. And yeah, and this check is particularly attractive because it brings the king into the open on g4 compared to, for example, moves like queen h1. After king e3, the king simply running. So once again, force moves the key in this position. Okay, I think that's all I have for this week. Thanks for listening, and please join me for next week's explanations. Thanks.